Assalamu alaikum. So everybody that's watching and is listening, I am so honored to be invited back onto Ramadan FM. I have actually been as a guest on this radio, alhamdulillah, a couple of years ago, and this year I am back with my own show, so I'm really excited and definitely very, very honored. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Maryam. First of all, I always like to introduce myself as a mum of 3 girls, alhamdulillah. And then I am the founder of Black and Brown Parenting, which is a parenting organization that works predominantly within Black and Brown communities to really help and support parents to move from a place of cultural parenting to that of love, which is based on the Quran and the Sunnah. So you will find me all over social media as Black and Brown Parenting, where I'm a parenting coach, a public speaker, alhamdulillah, where I speak at events and do coaching online and offline. But that's enough about me. Today I'm here because I cannot wait to speak to you all, connect with you all. So please do call into the studio line, which is 0116 482 2086. And you can also send in your questions and messages via text at 0774 88 55055. Please do text in, please do call in, because I'm really excited and I'm looking forward to speaking to all of you. I am also live on Instagram, so I'm going to give a little bit of a wave, but please do send in your questions, any messages that you have. I would love to answer and I would love to hear from you all. So what am I talking about today? I had so many things to talk about. If you know me, that you know that I talk a lot about parenting within our communities, parenting and letting go of a lot of, let's say, toxic cultural cycles that we have in our communities. But as it is Ramadan, and Ramadan Mubarak to you all, of course, I pray that it is going well. I mean, I cannot believe that we are a third into Ramadan already. I hope and pray that it has been going well for all of you, inshallah. Text in, call in, let me know how your Ramadan is going. And on that note, can we just say to all of the parents out there that are listening, especially to us as mums, isn't parenting and fasting, that is hard. That is, subhanAllah, that is just another level. Let me know if that's how you've been feeling, because I have definitely been feeling that. Because let's be honest and let's be real, parenting does not stop during Ramadan. You know, we still have to get up with the little ones if we have little ones. We still have to guide and nurture our teenagers if we have older kids. It does not stop. In fact, let's be real, it probably feels a million times harder, especially if you're fasting and you have to practice sabr, obviously practicing that patience with them, and also supporting them, especially if they're of that age where they are fasting as well, because it's not easy for them. So we're trying to manage our emotions, we're trying to control their emotions. It's not easy. Let me know if anybody can relate to that. The studio line again is 0116 4822 086. I would love to hear from you all, inshallah. So firstly, to begin with, I wanted to start with talking about tarbiyah. Okay? Now, to everyone that's listening and watching, the very first thing that you may think about when you think tarbiyah, it's always the tarbiyah of a child, right? The nurturing and the guidance of a child. But I want to flip that a little bit, and I want us to talk about, what about if tarbiyah actually started and it was really, really about the parent? Okay, because when I was in my parenting journey, I don't know about all of you, this is why I want to hear from you all. I came into parenting just thinking, yeah, it's about the kids. It's all about the kids. It's about their behavior. I've got to manage it. You know, I've got to discipline them. I've got to do all of these things. It has nothing to do with me. And actually, alhamdulillah, I've been a mum for over a decade now. And I tell you what, I take it all back. Actually, what I have seen in my own personal experience, but also in the work that I do, is that parenting is more about you as a parent as opposed to the child themselves. And we're going to talk about why What am I saying? Why am I saying this? SubhanAllah. How many of you, so for the parents that are listening, how many of you have gone into parenting and just thought, oh my goodness, there is so much that I need to work on within myself? Like, you've noticed things about yourself. Maybe it's certain behaviors, maybe it's like the tone of voice that you speak in, maybe it's certain things that you've said to your kids where you're like, shouldn't have said that. What have you noticed? So this is a question that I want to throw out to all of you, inshallah, everybody that's listening. What have you noticed about yourself since becoming a parent? What have you learned about yourself? And that could be something positive, or it could be something negative, or it could be both. I mean, for me, I know definitely when I first became a mum, I didn't realize that I didn't know what to do with a lot of my emotions. And so when my children were very little and they were having their tantrums and, you know, expressing their emotions, I'll be honest with you, I probably had my own tantrum. And what I mean by that is we resort to shouting, or we resort to just saying, what is wrong with you? Because we don't know what to do with their emotions, let alone our own. So the very first thing that I had to learn was something which is called emotional regulation, so that you can support your children's emotions. Now, let's take it back, because I think this is really interesting. And so because of the work that I do work within, predominantly, like I said, within brown and black communities. For a lot of us growing up, emotions may not have been a thing. Emotions may not have been a thing, or emotions may not have been allowed. So when you become a parent, naturally, you won't know what to do. I mean, I don't know if anybody else can relate. Like I said, please do call in 0116 4822 or just if you have questions just regarding what I'm saying, maybe it's a parenting struggle, maybe it's something you're a little bit stuck on, text into the studio at 0774 8855 Inshallah, I would love to hear from you. But going back to what I was saying about becoming a parent and learning things about yourself, and a disclaimer that I always have to give anywhere I'm speaking, or even when I'm coaching my clients, is may Allah bless our parents. May Allah bless each and every one of our parents. I mean, you know, I would like to say that most, if not all of them, did the best that they could, given the knowledge and the tools that they had at that particular time. And because I am predominantly talking about black and brown communities, as somebody who has studied South Asian and African colonial history at university, I can very strongly say that the reason why we have a certain style of discipline within our cultures and communities, the reason why we have a certain style of parenting within our cultures and our communities, is because there is a lot of generational trauma that exists. Okay, now I'm not going to give you a history lesson, but just to kind of go into what I mean by that is, if we think about what our ancestors have been through, if we think about what our grandparents have been through, we're talking about enslavement, which is, I mean, absolutely huge. And then we're also talking about partitions of countries of the subcontinent. And let's just for a second think about, I mean, I don't think we can, but let's just for a second try and just imagine the sheer violence and the sheer horror of what would have been witnessed, of families that would have been torn apart, of the list is completely endless. So the reason why we have a particular style of parenting within our communities predominantly does very much come from there. So I always like to say that when we think about our grandparents and our parents, they were parenting from a place of survival, simply survival. So for a lot of our grandparents and our parents, it was about putting food on the table. It was about having a roof over our heads. And that was simply it. They didn't have time. Like we're sat here today, alhamdulillah, they didn't have time to think about, I wonder how well of a, great of a person I am, or am I parenting my children in the right way? Or things that you and I perhaps worry about as parents, they didn't have the time, or let's say the privilege, to think about those things. Now, every time I say these things, again, here's another disclaimer. Obviously, that doesn't excuse the fact that many of us experience certain things growing up, and we're still unlearning those things as parents today. So if anybody has any thoughts on what I've just shared, or you want to share anything around this, or if you have a question, like I said, please do call into the studio at 0116 4822 086, or just send a text message at 077 488 55055, inshallah. And the reason why I think I'm mentioning this is because I think it's really important, because I do a lot of work around parenting within our communities, like I said. And this subject always constantly comes up, like, Maryam, how have we ended up in a place where, really harsh discipline and really tough love and really just no mercy? Why is that such a parenting style for our communities? And what I just shared just now is the answer. But that doesn't mean that we cannot move on from that. Now, something that I teach is called conscious parenting. Now, conscious parenting is simply a term which just means that as a parent, you are mindful. So you are mindful of your actions. You are mindful of your behavior. You are mindful of the words that you are using and your interactions with your children, whether they're toddlers, whether they are teenagers, no matter what age they are, you are very mindful. Now, the reason why this is a narrative shift, especially coming from as I keep saying, coming from Black and brown communities, the reason why this is such a narrative shift is because usually the mainstream narrative about parenting is that it's all about the child, and actually a parent can do no wrong, which we know it's not true. Now, something that I like to say about conscious parenting, it is a fairly new term, and if you're listening, you may have heard this term elsewhere. So it could be gentle parenting, it could be named as positive parenting. Those are the kind of terms that I use. I prefer to use the word conscious only because it really feels right to me that we as parents are mindful and conscious of the way that we are behaving, because I truly believe, and I've seen this from personal and professional experience, that when you change as a parent, your children change. And it's not because you've tried anything different with them. It's just the way that you speak to them, the way that you treat them, and the relationship that you have with them completely changes. But these are all skills that will need to be learned. I didn't know any of these skills. When I first became a mom, and I share my journey very, very openly because there's no shame in it. When I first became a mom, I was very immature, very emotionally immature. I didn't have the skills to know how to communicate with my kids, or, getting them to do something without shouting, without screaming. Let me know if anybody can resonate or relate to what I'm saying. Please do call into the studio, text in if you're feeling a little bit shy, text in at 077 488 55055. Inshallah, I would love to hear from you. So I didn't know these things. And some of you may be listening thinking, yeah, Maryam, I'm exactly the same. And there's absolutely no shame in that, because there are certain things that we need to unlearn, and there's certain things that we need to learn. Okay, so we'll go into that a little bit. So if you're sitting here listening and you're thinking, oh my goodness, Maryam, do you know what? I shout and I scream at my kids all day. Actually, what you're saying is right. I don't think I have the communication skills to build a loving, positive relationship with my children, so that, subhanAllah, if you've got toddlers, to everyone that's listening, that comes with its own struggles. If you've got teenagers, that comes with its own struggles. Allah tells us that our children are going to be a test for us. And that's absolutely true. But wallahi, something that I have seen, not only in my life, but just through the clients that I have coached and are coaching at the moment, is that parenting helps you to grow. It helps you to grow if you allow your child to give you that opportunity. SubhanAllah, the children that Allah has given us are not a coincidence. And I'm going to say that again. The children that Allah has given us are not a coincidence. So we all probably have that one child who perhaps drives us all the wall, right? Triggers us, and we're like, oh my goodness, maybe they remind us of ourselves, or maybe they're nothing like us. And for some reason, it's just that one particular child. May Allah bless them. Okay. I've definitely had that one. I'm not going to say which one because that wouldn't be right, but I've definitely had that one. Allah gave you that child for a reason. With the temperaments they have, the personality traits they have, Allah gave you that child. Because if you allow that child to help you to grow. So let me talk about what I mean a little bit. Maybe you have a child who's very expressive in their feelings. Okay, so when they're toddlers, they will tell you when something isn't right. You know, they will let you know through their crying. Or maybe you have a teenager who has a completely different personality to you. Or maybe they're very similar to yourself. And for some reason, that triggers you. It is intentionally, Allah is not coincidental. That is intentional that Allah has given you that child to grow. In the sense that, why is this particular thing frustrating me? So let's go on to, if you're in a place where you're like, oh my gosh, Maryam, you're right. I think that there's these aspects of myself that I need to work on as a parent. If you're in that place, let's go through a few steps of what you can begin to do to move forward, inshallah. Now, the very first step that I always say, it is about having self-awareness. You cannot work on something if you don't know or you don't accept that you're doing it. Okay? Now, we know that in Islam, we can be wrong as parents. We can make mistakes. Right? SubhanAllah, I'll tell you a story. So my girls, they always, if I am telling them not to do something and then I go and do it, they will hold me accountable. They will say to me, Mama, you said not to do X, Y, Z, and you've just done it. Or you tell us not to shout and you're shouting at us. Okay? Now, as parents, we all have something that's called an ego, right? Our nafs. And that might not feel right. It might not feel very nice when your children tell you when you are wrong. But they should respectfully be allowed to tell you when you are wrong, because that gives you room to grow alongside them. And I think, as simply as I'm putting it, I know it sounds really simple, but from a cultural perspective, it's something very alien. So I know a lot of us probably didn't grow up with ever being able to tell our parents respectfully that they are wrong, because we know what would come after that, subhanAllah. But for us as parents today, to allow our children to respectfully tell us when we are wrong is not a bad thing. In fact, I would say it's a very healthy, it's a very positive thing, because it means that we hold ourselves accountable. Number one, as humans, and then secondly, as parents, that we allow ourselves to hold ourselves accountable and we can apologize. And I know it's really funny when I say this, because again, from a very cultural perspective, I mean, I don't know who here has ever received an apology from their parents before, you know, be it something that happened before or be it something that's happened recently. It's still a very new phenomenon, especially within our black and brown communities. So if you are apologizing to your children, everybody that is listening, alhamdulillah, you have broken a beautiful generational cycle there. And it's beautiful because what you're doing is you're modeling to your children that I'm human. Yes, I'm your mom, or yes, I'm your dad. But I'm also human and I can make mistakes in the same way that you can. And it's okay for you to respectfully let me know. So let's go back to self-awareness. So having that self-awareness when you've messed up as a parent, maybe you've, lost your cool, you've lost your temper. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and this is something that I do with my clients. If there are certain things with your kids that are triggering you, so what I mean by triggering is probably frustrating you, driving you up the wall, and it's becoming a pattern, it's something that is happening very, very often, then that's something that needs to be looked into a little bit deeper. And one way that you can do that by yourself is simply by, if you like, writing things down, or if you like journaling, or even just, getting it on your phone, whatever it is, whatever way that you want to do it, simply becoming very mindful of what those things are. So maybe it's when your children say something to you. So maybe it's when let's say, for example, your 8-year-old is like, no, mama, I don't like, you've asked them to do something and they've said no. Or maybe your teenager holds a different opinion to that of yourself. And instead of hearing them out, you just start shouting and screaming and saying, no, you must do what I say. Okay? Now, that just could be one thing. Maybe it's just the constant, needs of your children. Maybe that frustrates you. there'll be very many things that will trigger you as a parent. And I know for us as mums, a lot of it is down to, overwhelm. A lot of it is down to, the constant being needed, and because we haven't done anything for ourselves for, a number of years. And I remember when I was in that place, everything felt very, very overwhelming. But your very first step is to have the self-awareness. Because if you don't know you're doing something, or you don't accept that you are doing something, you cannot work on it. So that's the very first thing, the very first step, and that's the very, very first thing that I would say when it comes to working on yourself as a parent. The second thing that I want to say, and I think this is really important, especially if you're trying to, let's say, change your parenting, especially if you're trying to do things a little bit differently from the way of your parents. But before we go into that, again, can I just remind you that if you have any questions, maybe it's a parenting struggle, maybe it's about something that I've said, maybe whatever it is, please do call into the studio line at 0116 4822 086, and you can send a WhatsApp or a text message to 077 488 55055, inshallah. Okay, so going back to what I was saying about changing your parenting and looking at your upbringing and taking the good, because inshallah there is definitely, I'm sure for most of us there's definitely good there, and then leaving behind what didn't work for you and what isn't going to serve you as a parent. So a question that I want you to ask yourself is, what do I want to bring forward from my upbringing? So what is it that was beautiful, mashallah? And especially at this time during Ramadan, one thing that I always remember, my mom, may Allah bless her, is my memories of Ramadan are so beautiful in the sense that it wasn't aesthetic as it is now, with all the things that we have now. But I simply remember my mom just reading so much more Quran and praying a lot more. And it was just the atmosphere of the home. And that's something that I have brought into my Ramadan with my children, right? So that's just one example. And just think about your upbringing. What were the values? What were the values that your parents gave you that you're like, yes, I definitely want to have this in my home, and I definitely want my children to have this particular value. Maybe it's the way that they were with the relationships. So for example, the ties of kinship, so the way that they were, with their brothers and sisters, or the way they were with their family, and how close-knitted they were, and the fact that they would sacrifice for each other. And I think that's a value, unfortunately, that we're really losing in today's society, that we've become very, very individualistic in the sense that nobody wants to do anything for anyone anymore. And I know as mums particularly, we really, really feel that lack of community, that lack of village, subhanAllah. And I was actually just talking to one of my clients last week, and I was saying, we all talk about wanting a village. Well, particularly us as mums. I don't know if dads do. I'm sure maybe there is that conversation. But we forget that in order to have a village, in order to have that communal support, we've got to also be willing to help other people. We've also got to be willing to be a village for other people. So I think especially during Ramadan, that is something to think about. And being a village for another person is inconvenient. It doesn't mean that it will be convenient for you. It doesn't mean that, you will want to always do that thing. And sometimes you won't want to do it, but you will do it for the sake of Allah. And I think that's something really, really important to remember, that we are losing that aspect of, and I think it is a very Western thing, and Islam teaches that, that togetherness and that sacrifice for each other. And I think that's why a lot of us as mums, subhanAllah, we suffer because we have that lack of support for our children, for ourselves. And that's probably why we feel so overwhelmed, and we're trying to do everything by ourselves. So now we started talking about village. This is what I always do. But if there's one thing that I can say just based off what I've just said, that if you're a mum who's listening, or even if you're a dad that's listening, and you're like, I feel so isolated, I feel so alone, I have no support, I'm doing everything by myself, I just want to say that I am sending you so much love, firstly, and I'm sending you so much dua, because that's the reality for a lot of us, unfortunately. And one way to overcome that is simply by taking off this mask that we do. I know we do it as mums, I don't know about dads, where when somebody else asks us, how are you? We say, Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Whether or not we mean that, I'm not sure, because we might be breaking inside. We might be really, really struggling. So the next time somebody asks you, how are you? Tell them how you really are. You know, you don't have to completely trauma dump, but tell them how you are. You know, I've had a really hard week. It's been really difficult. You know, I'm struggling with this when it comes to my kids. Like, lean on each other, because moms who have older kids may be able to advise you. Moms who have younger kids may be able to advise you. We can all learn from each other. So please do call into the studio at 0116 4822 and send a text message or a WhatsApp to 0774 8855 inshallah. Like I said, if you have a parenting struggle and you're listening to me speaking, you're thinking, I would really love some advice on this, please call in inshallah. Or if you just want to WhatsApp it or text it through, that's absolutely fine to do so as well, inshallah. Okay, so we've talked about self-reflection as parents. The next thing I want to talk about, which is something that I touched on in the beginning, is something called emotional regulation. Okay, now, like I shared my journey, I would love to hear from all of you. Like I shared my journey, that when I first became a mum, my emotional regulation, oh my goodness, subhanallah, it was non-existent. It was non-existent. I didn't know what to do when I felt angry and frustrated. Because anger and frustration, they're emotions. There's nothing wrong with those emotions. It's just the way that you express that thing. Okay? Now, for a lot of us, again, from a cultural perspective, we grew up in homes where anytime anybody was angry, there was probably a lot of shouting and screaming, a lot of raised voices, maybe some door slamming and a lot of other things as well, you know, and we don't want to replicate that in our homes. So in order to do that, we must learn emotional regulation. Okay, subhanallah. I'm just going to throw a few examples, okay? So let's say you have a teenager, okay? And they have asked you to do something which is not okay, okay? And this is something that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but something that is, they want to go to a particular place that you're not happy with them going with, okay? And they've asked you the question and you've said no, and as teenagers do, it's developmentally very normal for teenagers and toddlers, by the way, for children. Can I just say that it's very normal for children to test boundaries? Like, it's literally their job developmentally. And if you look into brain science, it is their job to test boundaries. So please don't feel like if your children are saying no to you, or if they're like, why, or if they're questioning things, you're not doing anything wrong. That's just simply children being children and teenagers being teenagers. But it is your job, obviously our job as parents, to guide them. So where we need to say no, we must say no. Where we need to guide them and explain why we're saying no, that's also very important. So let's say you've said no and they are still harboring on about going to this particular place, and your blood pressure is up here and you're just about to lose it, where you're going to start shouting and you are going to start screaming. This is where your ability to emotionally regulate, or this is where your ability to respond instead of react is going to come in. And something that I teach is that you need to build your self-regulation toolkit, okay? If you don't have one, then of course you're going to shout and scream, okay? So in order to build your self-regulation toolkit, I'm going to give a few examples. So in that moment, some people take a deep breath. It works for them. And I know a lot of my clients are like, it doesn't work, Maryam. It takes a lot of practice. You could simply count from 1 to 10 in your head. And I'll explain what we're doing here when we're doing these things. You could do some dhikr, okay? In that moment where you're just about to explode, do some dhikr. In that moment, you could practice a particular affirmation or a mantra. So in your head, you could be saying to yourself, I am the adult here. I am the adult here, right? Or you could say something like, my child is not giving me a hard time. You know, they're having a hard time. They're having a hard time understanding why I'm saying no. And I just need to explain it to them. Those are just a couple of examples. And what you're doing here is it's something that is called practicing the pause. So you're giving yourself those 5 seconds, those 10 seconds in order to respond instead of react. Now imagine what that would change. What would that change for your relationship with your kids? What would that change for you and the way that you feel as a parent? What would that change for the atmosphere of your home? And what would that change just for how the home feels? Because I know a lot of us, we're like, we want to build these beautiful, loving homes. And yes, it's not going to be perfect. And of course, you're going to lose your cool. Like, that happens, right? But what would that change if you knew how to just practice that pause? I would love to know. Please call into the studio 0116 4822 086. WhatsApp or text at 077 488 55055. What would that change for you? And if you've heard me give those few examples, let me know which one you're going to try and use. Let me know which one you're going to try and use, or maybe you've used something already and it's working for you or it isn't working for you. Let me know, inshallah. I would absolutely love to hear. Okay, so I think I've got, let's say, 10 to 13 minutes left, and I wanted to squeeze in this little bit because I think it's very important. So we've loosely touched on the tarbiyah in terms of tarbiyah as a parent. And maybe you're like, oh my gosh, Maryam, you're absolutely right. Parenting really is more about me than it is about my child. Maybe you're coming to that realization a little bit. If you're there and you're in a place where you're like, Maryam, oh my goodness, I need to work on myself. Gosh, this is terrible. I've got so much to work on. I don't want you to sit there, and I don't want you to shame, nor do I want you to blame yourself, because that's from shaitan. I truly believe that's waswasa from shaitan, and that means we'll stay stuck there. We'll stay stuck in that shame, and we're not going to make any changes, and we're just going to have a little bit of a pity party. Okay, I've been there. I've absolutely been there, and let me know if you've ever been there as well. We don't want to do that. What we do want to do is, firstly, we want to make dua to Allah to help us. That's the very first thing. Talk to Allah. Tell Allah, especially in these beautiful nights of Ramadan, what are you struggling with as a parent? Ask Allah to guide you. Ask Allah to help you. Ask Allah to, whether it's emotional regulation, whether it's a particular test with your teenagers, whether it's whatever it is that you're going through right now, ask Allah to help you first and foremost. And then secondly, take action. SubhanAllah, I was speaking on, so I'm a regular guest speaker on Islam channel, and I actually gave a segment just like this on one of the live shows. And I was giving an example, and this is particular maybe for the mums who are listening, that when we think about being mums, and when we think about womanhood, and when we think about strength, subhanAllah, there is so much strength in having sabr with our children. There is so much strength in that. And strength, we come from a lineage of women who had so much strength. And I'm going to just give a few examples. If we look at the story of Maryam alayhi salam, and when she was giving birth, mums, you already know what that's like, subhanAllah. When she was giving birth, and she was by herself, and that was her test, that was her trial, in a society that just didn't understand. And she was lonely, and she was giving birth. And she needed something, and Allah provided her with a solution. But Allah didn't just give her the solution. Allah told her to shake the palm tree. And that's when the dates fell down. And when we reflect on that, when I reflected on that, I just thought, look at that. Look at that. In the midst of our struggles, be it whether it's parenting struggles, whether it's just struggles just generally as a parent, as a man, as a woman particularly, Allah just doesn't want you to sit there. Allah wants you to try. And that try might be a small try, it might be a small effort or a big effort. Allah just wants us to try. So whatever it is that you're struggling with at the moment, like I said, we are talking about parenting. What is it that you can do? What's one action that you can take? Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's a conversation with your children. and sitting down with them in the evening after iftar and just saying to them, do you know what, I listened to this thing and I really want to work on myself as a parent, and I'm going to actively do that. And we're on the same team and I want things to improve. You know, I don't want our home to be filled of shouting and screaming, and, you know, I don't want that. And I'm sure you don't want that as well. So let's work together. And you can even ask your children. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I remember when I first asked my daughters this question, I didn't like the answers. You can ask your children, what is it about mummy, or if you're a dad, what is it that you would like me to improve? What is it that I need to improve on? What can I do to be the better mum? Or what can I do to be a better dad? What is it? And like I said, you may not like the answers, but those answers are probably the key to what's going to, inshallah, make your home beautiful and loving, inshallah. Not perfect. I will, listen, perfection is not for us. Perfection is only for Allah. It will never be perfect. So if you want to try that question, I mean, please do. Let me know. Let me know if you're going to try that question. Text in WhatsApp at 077 488 55055. Inshallah. Let me know if you're going to try that, or if you're going to try another question. Okay. So let's quickly, before my time finishes, go through the different stages of tarbiyah. Okay, now this is based on the hadith from Ali radiallahu anhu, and it goes through the different stages of tarbiyah with our children. So when they are babies, up until 7 years old, our simple job is to be their friend and to play with them. You know, they're very little at that age. It's to build that beautiful relationship. It's to build that bond. It's to have those connections with them. That is our job at that particular age. And I know brain science is now catching up and always tells us that, you know, 0 to 7 are those formative ages where you're planting those seeds, where they're understanding about themselves, where they're developing their character. Those are very important stages and ages. So that's 0 to 7. And then when they get older and they get to the ages of 7 to 14, that's the time where the seeds that you have planted when they're 0 to 7, you start to see them come to fruit. And this is the age at 7 to 14, you want to teach them. Okay? You need to guide them and teach them. Now let's take this a little bit to the modern perspective and the real life perspective. Something that I always say as a coach is that from the ages of 7 to 14, what you will notice, and you've probably noticed this as parents, is that there is something called parent-to-peer transference. Now, what happens at this stage, especially if your children go to school, is you will notice your children pulling away from you, and their friends become very important, very important. So they take a lot of influence from their a lot of influence from their friends, and maybe you say things to them and they think, oh, you don't know anything, Mum. I'm sure a lot of us have been there as well when we were that age, you know, may Allah forgive us. We've all been there, you know, and you will notice that with your children, which is why the ages of 0 to 7 are so foundationally important to build that relationship with your children. And then the ages of 7 to 14 is where you want to really hone in on the influence that you have over them. Now, what do I mean about influence? Influence meaning you are able to guide them. Now, let's go back to what I was saying in the beginning. A lot of the cultural parenting, unfortunately, is through harsh discipline. Discipline is important, okay? Disclaimer, discipline is very important. But every time I ask this question, anywhere I go and speak, when we think about discipline, especially as parents from our communities, we always think discipline means to shout. Let's go even further, maybe it even means to hit. Let's go even further, maybe it means to just constantly criticize and compare. That's not discipline, okay? That's not discipline, because if I did that to a friend, I don't think she would ever listen to me. So if we want our children to listen to us and keep hold of that influence, then it's got to be through love. Now, love can be kind and it can also be firm at the same time. So something that I had to learn in my journey is I had to learn how to set these boundaries. So when I've got 2 older daughters and I've got a 4-year-old. So when my older daughters were coming to me and saying, Mummy, I want to watch this, or Mummy, I want to go here, Mummy, I want to do this, but my friend's doing it and this person's doing it. There is a way to kindly but firmly say, I hear you. I understand you want to go there. I get that it's really important to you, but your father and I have discussed, or we've decided, and you give them an explanation for why. Now, just because you give them that explanation doesn't mean they're going to be over the moon about it and they're totally going to understand. That's okay. But you've given them that explanation. I mean, how many of us weren't allowed to do certain things when we were growing up, and we look back now and we're like, subhanallah, I'm so thankful that my parents didn't let me do that thing. It saved me. In the same way that when your teenagers grow up, inshallah, when your children grow up, they will absolutely experience the same. It's just called the circle of life. It's just the way in which we do it, which is really, really important. Because like I said, the influence, to keep hold of that influence at the ages of 7 to 14 are so incredibly important. Now, 14 plus, we have to be their friend. 14 plus. Because usually by that age, they are now accountable for their sins. They have hit puberty and beyond. They are now young adults. Maybe they have their own families now, or maybe they're looking to get married. And, it doesn't mean that we can't continue to guide them, but it does mean that the seeds that we have planted have now grown, have now flowered and come to fruition. It doesn't mean it's too late. And this is a question before I end off. This is a question that I get all the time. So if anybody is listening and you have young adults, you have 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, you have a 7-year-old, and you're like, oh my gosh, Maryam, I've missed the formative years. Oh my goodness, it's too late. I've made so many mistakes. I'm going to say to you, don't panic. It's never, ever too late. And I genuinely mean that from the bottom of my heart, that it's never, ever too late to work on yourself as a parent, to work on your parenting, to improve the relationship that you have with your children. It's never, ever too late. I mean, I have had clients who have 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, most recently 21-year-olds, the ones that who even married. And I've worked with the mums to work on themselves, because it's usually, like I said in the beginning, it's us. I'm not saying that children can do no wrong. Of course they can. Absolutely, they can. But if we are able to change our behavior, and if there's any take-home point that I would love for you all to take home today, is that Ramadan is the perfect time to work on yourself. Subhanallah. It's the perfect time to hold yourself to account. It's the perfect time to hold yourself to account with compassion. So remember, it's not about shaming and guilting yourself. It's the perfect time to look at areas of your life, whether it's your parenting, as we're talking about today, whether it's certain struggles you're having with your kids, whether it's, oh my God, I'm shouting and screaming too much. There needs to be some changes in the home. There's things that you can do yourself. The du'as that you can make, especially we are going to be very, very soon searching for Laylatul Qadr, and, exceeding, and, our du'as are going to be coming even stronger and frequent. Ask Allah first and foremost to help you and to guide you. And secondly, take action. Take action, my brothers and sisters, because Allah, I was saying this to my daughter the other day, Allah tells us to, tie our camel. But we've got to put in the work as well. So whatever action it is that you know that you need to take, maybe it's seeking help, maybe it's seeking support, maybe it's working with a coach, maybe it's finding a therapist, maybe it's, I already know what to do. Maybe you already know what to do, but you just haven't acted on it. Maybe you haven't practiced it yet. Inshallah, allow Ramadan to be that time and that moment for you to be able to, implement the changes that you need to make. To everybody that's listening, Jazakallah khair for listening. I know that, like I said, it is Ramadan, and dua that I make for all of you who are listening and beyond, that whatever hardship and struggle that you are going through at the moment, may Allah ease it for you. May Allah grant you ease. May Allah allow you to take the action and give you strength that you need to take. May Allah bless all of your children. May Allah bless you and reward you for your patience, because it isn't easy being a parent and fasting and doing all of these other things. It's not easy, and your reward is definitely with Allah. And so may Allah bless you both. I am going to be back next week, inshallah, and the week after. So if there's a particular topic that you want me to cover, or if you have particular questions, please do pop them. I believe we are live on Facebook, inshallah. You can put them there. I definitely will see them, inshallah. But jazakallah khair for having me, and inshallah I will see you next week. Keep me in your du'as as well, inshallah, alongside making du'a for yourself and your children, inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.